So the story of basketball begins in, of all odd places, Canada, in Ontario, Canada, in a village called Almonte, Canada. It's a small mill town. Its main industry is logging, and it's populated largely by Scottish immigrants or Scots. I'm not sure what generation of Scots were actually there in the 1800s, but is a harsh physical life. And I found this picture of the internet of what life was like in Ontario in the 1900s. This picture is called Man by Fire. And think of Scots and their Presbyterian theology and their harsh way of thinking like, well, let me put it this way. This was not the land of milk and honey. This is not an easy environment. Today is Earth. Yesterday was Earth Day. I'm in San Francisco. It's bright and sunny outside, and I got some vegetables and fruits at the free farm stand. I'm thinking, hey, life has just got all this plenty and abundance. But it's kind of what my reality is right now on a sunny Sunday in California. But this was not what it was like in 19th century Ontario when basketball was born. There's a harsh existence in Ontario. It's snowy, it's cold weather, nature is rough, and it's something antagonistic towards you. But you are sustained by your faith in God and Jesus Christ. Here's a picture of Man by the Fire, a cold winter day. It's his soul and God and the fire and his faith that keeps him together. This is sort of the context of the religion and the lifestyle of what was going on at that time. So, in that context is born our hero, James Naismith, who is the hero of this story. He's born in a village near Almonte, Ontario. Here's a picture of him. Looks like he's probably about 11 or 12. This is his younger brother who would die at a very young age. There were a lot of children would die in childbirth back then. That was happening. But James Mason, like everyone else in his community, where he came from a family of lumberjack, was also a Scot, and he would be the first person in his family to go to college. And just look at this demeanor of this young man. This is him. I'm not quite sure how old. Figured out. Looks like he's maybe 19 or 20. But just look at that face. Look at the way he's staring at the camera. This is someone with I don't know. I think that's a very profound expression. Like he knew he had something to do. That's a look of like determination, greatness, lack of fear. He knew he had a mission and he was going to do it. So this is a birth chart of James Naismith. I'm going to talk about some of the details of it. I've rectified this chart. It's one of the things I'm working on. I'm pretty sure I got it figured out. Rectification is kind of a way of like reverse it engineering somebody's birth chart to figure out their time of birth, their date of birth, to come up with a rising sign and house placements for the various planets. And I'm not totally sure I've got it, but I think I've got it figured out. So I have James Naismith with Capricorn rising, moon and the North Node conjunct in Cancer in the first house. And I'm looking at this Capricorn rising as a reflection of how this rising sign, how he would approach the world, the environment that he's up against. It's that tough Capricorn exterior of like, life is hard, life is harsh, but I can meet it. I am very realistic. I am a person who handles reality and will take what life throws me. I'm not going to be a wuss. I'm going to meet life on its own terms and answer it. It's not idealistic in that sense. It's not dreamy, but it's practical and going forward, proceeding in a dedicated way. It's also a reflection of his inherited Scottish toughness and stoicism, like life is hard. It's right there in his moon, a North Node, and Capricorn ascendant. Another thing to know about James Naismith, his mother would die when he's 9 years old. Both his parents would actually die when he's 9 years old. It was very unfortunate, but his mother did not leave his life. We could He was known to, when he was a boy, he would go into a grain bin on the farm where his family lived, and he would talk to his deceased mother while he was in his grain bin. Now, not too recently, we would call that kind of loony, but now we can say that he was channeling his mother, and his mother would remain his moral compass throughout his whole life. Even though his mother was dead, it's a very strong presence of a mom figure to have the moon in your first house. And James Naismith had this right there in his first house. And the fact that it is in the sign of Capricorn, there's like an emotional kind of, it's sort of like the moon is not comfortable in Capricorn. There's sort of like an absence of the flow of emotional energy. This is not somebody who's going to be emotional. It's not, there's a blockage somewhat. So the blockage that his mother is absent but present. There's like a dualism here. It's so present because it's in the first house, but yet absent and stilted by being in the sign of Capricorn, where the moon is not comfortable. Another thing I want to point out, next thing I want to point out is this man has Sun in Scorpio opposite to Pluto in Taurus. Pluto is the planet of death. The fact that it's in this intense opposition, and that it's in the fourth house of parents. This reflects the death of both his parents at age 7. They died in an epidemic that I believe it was a flu epidemic there that passed through Ontario when he was 9 years old, and he would be raised by his uncle after that. It also reflects his ability to see things. Somebody that's got Pluto opposite their sun and has experienced death in this intense way is going to look at things very realistically. This is not somebody that you could lie to. This is not somebody that is going to fall for phony ads or anything like that. This is someone who can see things very realistically. If you've got Pluto staring down its face, if you look us in the eye this way, you see reality in a very real way. This person had that ability to see things. If you've got Pluto opposite the sun, you've got that. You're also, with Pluto opposite the sun, having experienced all that death early in your life, you're going to become a badass. James Naismith I think he was a badass. This is like the kind that you look at this guy's chart, and I think, God, he could look the devil in the eye and the devil would flinch. This guy's not going to be scared of a whole lot. Another feature I want to point out, Jupiter conjunct Saturn right here in the 8th house. Jupiter is a planet of your hopes and ideals, your plans, your ideals, your aspirations. And Saturn is the planet of hard reality, of being able to like the planet of clay, of making things happen, that he had these things in conjunction. This is somebody who can take his ideas, his thoughts, his theories, and make them into reality. I mean, he would do this. So he's got a very strong ability to manifest. He can make his ideas, his dreams into reality. Next thing I want to point out is Sun square his Venus and his ascendant. Let me move these things down. Neptune squares Venus. Here's Neptune in late Pisces, 29 Pisces, square to his Venus and his ascendant. So if someone's normally got this aspect, it can make somebody very spacey, maybe very loving, but indiscriminate. Neptune, you lose your boundaries. This could be somebody who just wants to hug everybody, but probably may hug the wrong persons and all that. But the fact that it's got a Capricorn ascendant and all that, I think he was pretty grounded in his spirituality, and it did not go astray. So I'm kind of imagining this had this radiating quality of with Neptune right there. Even though he was a badass, he just came across very, very sweet and very loving, with Venus right there on his ascendant and Neptune squared it. So this is the background of what's going on while James Naismith is going on. This is This is what's happening astrologically. You have in the late 1800s the conjunction of Neptune and Pluto. This is the rarest of the conjunctions between outer planets, between the known outer planets. It happens approximately every 500 years. And when these planets come together, there is going to be a major change in the ages. So what happened with the 1890s, what's going on here is a changing of ages. The previous 500 years have been, the neo. I mean, I'm borrowing off of Richard Tarnas's books, which I'm going to show in the next slide. The Neoplatonic Christian era, you've got from the Renaissance till around the 1800s, where we had this primacy of reason. It's the assumption that rationality and thinking things through is the apex of human experience. It's the most important thing to be a reasonable person. This came out of the Renaissance, was developed in the Enlightenment. It's the assumption that reason is the most important thing. And it's all this abstract ideal of reason and thinking things through. So in the 1890s, Neptune and Pluto come together. Now we've got a counter energy that is being acknowledged. Now we're acknowledging the subconscious realms, that there are buried forces in our psyche that are just as valid, perhaps more valid, that are not our rational, well thought out ones. And with this acknowledgement of the subconscious, with this emergence of it, there's a new aesthetic. We have jazz music now. Music is no longer so planned and rational and orderly and sweet. Now it's somewhat sort of chaotic. It's still rational because you have to have some repeated patterns in any kind of music for it to be music and not noise. But we've got the emergence of jazz music. And then in art, we have surrealism. Surrealism can be explained rationally, but it's better explained in a dream realm or in some, don't try to understand it, just absorb it. I mean, you can understand it in a way that can't be rationally explained. It can be rationally explained, but it's best to just sort of flow with it and try to understand it. When you see an artist like Mondrian or one of the surrealists of that age, you could say, okay, look at it and a kid will freak out and go, that doesn't make any sense. But no, it does make sense in a different way. So anyways, this is what's emerging in the 1890s with the Neptune-Pluto conjunction. Richard Tarnas, I'm going to talk about later, calls this the return of Dionysian energy. This is a book I recommend, Cosmos and Psyche, Intimations of a New Worldview by Richard Tarnas. And he talks about the changes of the ages here in the 1890s. So you've got the return of Dionysian energy, which had been suppressed by the rational worldview. You know, the Dionysian energy is unconscious, or it doesn't have to be unconscious, but it's irrational. Dionysus is the ancient Greek god of wine. And it's things that are somewhat excitable, emotional, irrational. So now we've got a place for that. It's being acknowledged. And after this Neptune-Pluto conjunction. So I'm going to talk about Friedrich Nietzsche for a little while because he's a good example. He's a champion of the Dionysian energy. And Richard Tarnas talks about him a lot in his book. And he's a good example of the return of Dionysian energy at the time of the 1900s. I mean, and he talks about it. He wants to say that Dionysian energy is equally, if not more valid. I think he does say it's more valid than reason. He champions biological instinct is more important for a human being than reason. Reason has repressed us. It's shut us off from really important parts of ourselves, parts of our psyche, and that's why we're neurotic, and that's why we're unhealthy, and why we do things that we shouldn't do because we've repressed our Dionysian energy. Think like one way of thinking of the Dionysian energy of just what's life-affirming physicality. It's somewhat sexual, but it's not purely sexual. It's just that biological instinct within us to be able to affirm that and to be like that is more important than focusing your energy on a distant metaphysical ideal or of thinking of like, okay, let's just worry about getting into heaven. Let's focus our energy on God. That's something so far away, so distant, so far away. It's better to just be in the present in our body and then just feel ourselves biologically and revel in that. This is what Nietzsche is championing in The Birth of Tragedy and some other writings. So, but it's more than that. The biological present leads to like the ecstatic rapture of Dionysus. It's that feeling of just rapture that you get. You don't have to be drunk. You don't have to be high to get it. You can get it in other ways. I'm going to talk about it in sports in a little while. Um, so more about Friedrich Nietzsche. He's considered anti-Christian. He wrote a book called The Antichrist, which I have not read. Hope to read it somewhat. He championed the Antichrist. He would talk about, dialogues. Towards the end of his life, he would talk about he'd write these sort of witty little dialogues that he was having with the devil. But regardless of all that, for our purposes here, we're talking about Dionysian energy, which is reemerging at this time and will show itself to be really important to our story. So, but Friedrich Nietzsche and the Pluto Neptune conjunction did not kill off Christianity. Christianity reacted in a very interesting way. Um, Suddenly you get this movement within Christianity called muscular Christianity, where they reclaim the body. It's a counter to the Christian ideal of denying the body and of feeling like, okay, the spirit and the soul and God are against the body. Instead, they reclaim the body. There's a new trinity is emerging of spirit, mind, and body. The body is considered virtuous and beautiful, and sports are emerging at this time, organized sports. We get the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games emerge out of the 1890s and out of this Pluto Neptune conjunction. This is the context of what's happening. Christianity adopts to this new movement of incorporating the Dionysus. And then we also get physical education. Physical education becomes part of Christianity, and I'm gonna talk about that more in a little while. Um, so, in this context, while all this happening in the background, James Naismith, the hero of our story, goes off, enrolls in college. Out of a family of lumberjacks, he's the first person to enroll in it from his family to go off to college. He goes off to McGill University in Montreal, and the deal with his family is he's only allowed to go to college if he's going to study to become a Presbyterian minister. That they'll allow him to go to college if he does that, and he has to come home on breaks and cut down some more trees. He's still got to do his work as a lumberjack. Still help out around the family farm. So um, while he's in college, he studies theology. He plays rugby. He does gymnastics, but he does not drink. I think he got drunk once and he tied one on, but I think he was channeling his mother. His mother disapproved, and he just no, he's not going to do that. I mean, he's around a bunch of roughnecks. I mean, these guys are rugby players. People who play sports. He's up college boys, that age. It's natural for them to drink, but James Naismith did not drink. He's a pretty clean cut guy. He's very athletic, plays rugby, plays gymnastics, and then one day while he's playing rugby, he has an epiphany. He's playing sports, and then somebody on the field swears. I don't know what the swear word was that he said, but suddenly the person apologized and he said, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know you were around. Otherwise, I wouldn't have sworn." And realizing, so James Naismith has an epiphany. He can have an impact on people through sports and physical education rather than being a Presbyterian minister. You realize that that's his calling is physical education. It's not to be a minister, even though he'd written all these theology articles and he'd done his preaching and all that. So that's what he realizes that's his calling is in PE. So when he tells his family, they really do not like them. He tells them he's going to quit the ministry and devote his life to PE. He says no, they really disapprove of that because their thoughts was, oh no, sports is the devil's playground. You can't be doing this. So they nearly disown him, but they do not. So James Naismith finishes college, and then he goes off he gets recruited by this new organization in the context of muscular Christianity. There's a new faculty, there's a new school a new school of that. There are these series of organizations that are teaching physical education, and they would eventually become the YMCA, but at the time they're called the School for Christian Workers. And he gets recruited to join the faculty in Springfield, Massachusetts. So he leaves Canada, he goes to the United States. He joins this faculty to train physical educations, to join PE teachers. And he has a group of students, and they're a pretty rough crowd. I think the books, I'll keep just using this word incorrigibles. I mean, okay, that's a word that you don't use these days, but I think we know what incorrigible means. I mean, I'm not a teacher, but imagine having incorrigible students trying to come up with some form to do, and they don't want to do it. They're incorrigible. So he's got to handle these rough incorrigible students, and he's given the challenge by the headmaster. Can you invent a game that will keep these students alert and interested and focused during the winter months? Because in spring and summer they can play baseball, and I think in fall they can play football, but during the winter months it's raining and snowing in Massachusetts. They're stuck in the gym. So he's got to come up with a game to keep them focused. So what does he do? He um, he thinks about it, and he thinks about it, and he plots it out, and he plots it out, and then he comes up with a game. Doesn't yet have a name, but he gets the janitor in the gym to nail peach baskets on the sides walls, and then he says, "Okay, this is a game. You've got the ball. It's like I think they originally used the ball. It was somewhat like a soccer ball. You can't advance the ball by running it. You have to pass it, and you've got to get the ball in the basket." Well, they had a hard time really playing ball with the basket. I'm getting the ball in the basket, but but somebody did get a ball in the basket, and the game was one to nothing. I mean, this is a drawing that ended up in the newsletter for the YMCA's, and it was drawn by this guy who was there at the first game. He's actually from San Francisco. He's a Japanese guy, Gensaburo Ishikawa. I have a funny feeling that he might have even walked down my street, because I live next to an old Presbyterian church, and he had some connection with the Presbyterian churches here in San Francisco. But anyways, this is a drawing. You can kind of look at it. It has a sort of a Japanese kind of a style to it. You kind of appreciate the I'm not the kind of like the Japanese aesthetic in there, but there's no photographs of that first game, but this is like the drawing of it. So what happened? What is the astrology of this very first game? This is what I've, this is like the intensest thing that I've uncovered at this point in my studies with basketball. There is documentation of when this first game was. It happened on December 21st, 1861, during 11:30 a.m. class. There is time of when there is a time set of when the class started, so it might be a little bit later than this. Maybe the tip off was a few minutes later, but there is documentation that the class was at 11:30 on the day. And so there's a lot of really interesting things in this here. The first thing I want to mention is this. Here is the conjunction of Pluto and Neptune, which I was talking about with the Dionysian energy that was happening in this age. The fact that these came through, and it's the focus of a yod. When you've got a yod, it's like when you've got two planets both at 150 degrees to it, then you've got a lot of focus towards this. Here you've got Mars and Uranus conjunct here in Scorpio, roughly 150-degree aspect to this to the conjunction of Neptune and Pluto, and then also you have Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, also roughly 150-degree aspect. So you've got all this focus, all this energy being focused right here from both Mars, Neptune, and Uranus. So this is a focus on the Dionysian energy that's happening through the game of basketball. So I was talking earlier about Friedrich Nietzsche and championing the return of the Dionysius. So when I think about the game of basketball as a container for Dionysian energy, think of that rapturous energy of sports. When you're playing the game, you're playing really hard and you're totally focused, you're completely present mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and you're all there. That's the Dionysian energy, and you're completely focused, and it's a physical thing that's happening. That's the rapturous energy of sports. You do not need drugs for this. You do not need sex for this energy. You can channel it with sports, and it's best for the players, but the observers get it as well. It's this flow of Dionysian energy is happening here in basketball, and it's there because you've got the Mars energy here. It is grabbing it. So is Mercury energy right here, grabbing it and channeling it. So it's all being poured into this, and you're just feeling it, that enraptured energy of basketball when you're playing it or watching it is right there and being channeled. So think of the game as a container for this energy that had been repressed for so long. Um, Now we've got a container for it. So next thing I want to point out, this is a really tight square. You've got the sun in Sagittarius. It's about to go into Capricorn. So we're right on the brink of going into the winter solstice, but we're not there yet. But we are in an extremely tight square with Saturn in Virgo. I mean, look how tight this is. 29 degrees Sag, 34 minutes. 29 degrees Virgo, 48 minutes. Right there. This is such a tight square, and you've got the sun just about to go into Capricorn. So I want to point out this. You've got a liminal realm that's happening. Um, you're right on the edge between these two signs of Capricorn and Sagittarius. And I want to talk about this liminal realm of Sagittarius and Capricorn because you've got Sagittarius. It's the energy of Sagittarius is very aspirational. It's going upward. You want to, you're aspiring for things. You're aspiring for something that's just beyond what your present is. And then you've got the energy of Capricorn. It's like the energy of hard reality. So you're right on the edge. This game is living on the border between dreams, aspirations, and hard, cold reality. So think of the aspiration of Jupiter. Here's the player just jumping upwards and then trying to get the ball into the hoop and into the net. And then there's like the inevitable hard fall to the ground. Think of like leaping upward and then coming crashing down. You leap as high as you can, but the higher you jump, the harder you fall because it's like, and then you fall and you hurt your ankles, you hurt your knees. You're reminded of just how hard life is. And basketball players get injured. Their knees and their ankles and their hips are a mess because of all this jumping up and down. It's like the leaping upward and then the coming back down to hard reality. This is one of the dynamics of basketball. It's trying to go beyond what's real and what's there, aspiring beyond that, aspiring to jump as high as you can, and then then crashing back down to earth. This is what this game, a lot of, I mean, there's the Dionysian energy of basketball, but this is equally a big part of the game of what's going on with basketball. Also want to talk about the element of time. Saturn, the game of basketball is very time bound. You've got quarters, you've got halves, you've got it all divided up into certain increments of time, and then the game, and the buzzer ends, and then the buzzer sounds, and then the game ends. The game's over, and somebody goes home happy, somebody goes home not so happy. And the time element. Time is governed by Saturn, but the clicking of the clock is so important to this game, and that's. But you're contained by time. You're pushing up against it, doing as much as you can within it, but yet you're ultimately contained. I mean, for all the aspirational qualities of Jupiter, for all the aspirational qualities of Sagittarius, Saturn and Capricorn are containing them, keeping it molded, keeping it earthbound. Um, Also want to point out the sign Sagittarius. Think of like the archer. This is similar to what happens in baseball. Baseball, the batter is ruled by Sagittarius. You've got the batter is much like an archer in Sagittarius. You're aiming to hit the ball in an auspicious place, so you've got the basketball player shooting the ball. towards the basket. It's similar to an archer shooting the ball into the air, and it's inevitably going to come down. It's like, okay, if you can look at this, think of this light up here above the basket as the star. You're aiming towards a star. You're aiming towards the sky. Something is drawing you towards the sky, but you're not going to get there. You are possibly going to get the ball into the hoop and the basket, but that's only because of gravity. Gravity is what brings things back down to earth. Gravity is ruled by Saturn. Gravity is the limitation that we all have living on this planet. We may aspire towards the sky, but gravity is going to bring us down. And you cannot have basketball in outer space in some sort of zero gravity zone. It's got to be played with gravity. Otherwise, that ball is just not going to land in that ball. You shoot the ball, it's just going to keep going higher and higher and higher. It won't go through the hoop. So gravity and Saturn is so essential to basketball. So this is an interesting picture that I found on the internet. I was looking for something and I was lucky to find it. Didn't know that it existed, but this is a reminder of the James Naismith. His roots were still in Christianity and Presbyterian theology and all that. And here's a picture of a basket on a Christian cross. And what I'm trying to show with this is like the primary movement of basketball is vertical. It's a leaping upward, unlike I think football, what I think is sort of a horizontal. You're trying to conquer territory, going east or going west, trying to conquer things. Basketball, no, you're going upward. You're trying to go towards the sky. And this is based on a religion where your God of your religion lives in the sky, doesn't live in the earth like pagan religions. Baseball has a pagan base. It's more like an earth realm, pagan religion underpinnings. But no, basketball has a sky aspiration, like Judeo-Christian tradition. God exists in the sky and in the heavens, in the sky, somewhere above us, not below us, above us. And so I'm thinking basketball, with its primary movement being vertical, we're leaping upwards, we're shooting the ball upwards. We're, in a sense, that's symbolic of trying to connect with a God that lives in the sky. Okay, so next part of the game of basketball, I'll talk about the Mars-Uranus conjunction right here. I want to talk about this. Oh, hold on. Okay, so Mars conjunct Uranus. So Uranus is the planet that rules the sign Aquarius, and so there's Aquarian Uranian energy to this game, and the game, I'm arguing, ultimately has an Aquarian humanitarian agenda. There is a team, there's necessary teamwork to a good basketball team. People have to work together, and if it all goes smoothly, they share interests. They're able to overcome their differences, culturally, racially, whatever other issues that they have with them. It's this sort of ability of humanity as its best to overcome its differences and work together, see their common humanity and work as a goal, work towards the same purpose of winning this game or whatever purposes they have. And I think the very first class that James Naismith had, that were the first people to play the game of basketball. Here's a picture that I found of them, of the School of Christian Workers class of 1891, 1892. And they're a pretty good example of what's possible here. They were, even though this was in Massachusetts, they were not all Americans. Several of them were from Canada, including Naismith himself. There was one Frenchman, I'm not sure where he is, but there was also the one Japanese person right here, Kenzaburo Ishikawa of San Francisco, who would eventually run a YMCA here in San Francisco years later. I'm trying to find out more about him, but I think he might have gone back to Japan. I was kind of thinking maybe he landed in the internment camps. but no, he did not. But he is somebody I want to find out more about. But the idea that keep this in mind because I'm going to talk more about this a little later. So also want to talk about the element of air. Aquarius is an air sign. We've also got, let's go back to look at the chart. We've got the air houses are all busy in this chart. Um, the third house is an air house. You've got Gemini as an air sign. Of course, we've got Pluto and Neptune in Gemini, the third house, also an air house. The 11th house is an air house. It's the house that corresponds with Uranus and the sign Aquarius. Venus is in this house. And okay, the seventh house is an air house. Saturn's there, Uranus is there on the cusp. So air is an important element of basketball. We're going to be passing the ball through the air. We're leaping upwards. The ball itself, it's not like a small solid ball like in the game of golf or like in the game of baseball. Instead, it gets inflated. Um, Basketball also needs mental strategy. I guess most sports do, but it is interesting when you see the coach doing, coming up with a plan with his little tablet or whatever it is, and he's he's devising it all out and explaining it. I mean, that's very very mental, very air. And so, otherwise, basketball, I'm contrasting it with baseball, which is more like an earth-centered game, and I think of football as a fire-centered game. But yeah, basketball, I think of like air. Air is the important element going on here. So, um, air influence. What I got? Okay, so I'm talking about the history of basketball. Basketball became very popular in the early 20th century. It rapidly spread through the network of YMCA's all over the world, and it was also very popular among women. There were a lot of women's basketball teams. Going through this internet, I found there were lots of pictures like this one of these women's basketball teams in colleges and high schools and at I guess there were YWCA. So many women teams were formed. And I think it's interesting to point something out. Let's go back to the chart. Venus is in the 11th house of basketball. I think of the 11th house as the house of the team. That Venus, the sign, the planet of women, is right there in the 11th house. So maybe that was just an early indicator that this game would be popular among women. Um, okay, and basketball also would become a venue for civil rights. This is a place where it's because it serves as a meritocracy. Um, you do not have to be rich to um, play basketball. It's unlike a lot of sports that you need to pay for your coach and to pay for fancy equipment. This is not going to matter here. Also, it's a place where, okay, so you've got the humanitarian ideal. People have to work as a team. If someone's good, they'll let you play, regardless of what race you are, what ethnic lines you are. This is it's an early picture of the Harlem Globetrotters. I think this is from the early 20s. I think all the players are black, but the owner and manager was Jewish. His name's Abe Saperstein. Um, and they would go on to do a lot of really interesting things. So basketball is going to become a venue for civil rights because minority players are given a chance here. They're able to excel, and they're going to become very vocal in the course of the history of basketball. But that's getting ahead of the story. So this is what's going. So it's the early 20th century. Basketball is very popular, and it's making strides for civil rights. People are people are given chances that they wouldn't normally. But then we get the 1930s, and the planet Pluto is discovered. And what happens when a planet is discovered is new forces are at play. And what's going to happen with Pluto in the 1930s is we have the rise of fascism, kind of like what we're having today, only there it was somewhat new and also extreme. So you got extreme nationalism. People are identifying with their tribe in a way of like their tribe to the exclusion of everybody else. You've got xenophobia. People are scared of people that are different. And then you've got extreme anti-Semitism. all these are contrary to the ideals of basketball. Basketball with its humanitarian mission, with its ability, which is becoming a venue for civil rights, which is bringing people together who are racially and culturally different. Okay, it's got to confront what's going on with basketball. So with the rise of fascism. Hang on a second, I've got a little bit of a problem with my slides. Um, no, I'm good. Um, okay, so in 1936, the Olympics are held in Berlin, Germany, during while the Nazis had recently taken over. And you wonder why did the Olympics allow the the Olympics to be held? Why did the Olympic Committee allow the Olympics to be held in Nazi Germany? Well, it had been granted there, I think, some years before the Nazis had taken over, so it wasn't planned, but so it happens. 1936, the Olympics are held, hosted. The hosts are the Nazi Party and Adolf Hitler, and there were calls for various nations to boycott the Olympics, but most of these the boycotts didn't happen, and the Olympics proceeded. All the world's focused on Berlin in 1936. So, what's going to happen to basketball? Basketball, with its humanitarian ideals, what's going to happen in this game during this time? This is really interesting because at the time, the 1936 Olympics is the same time basketball is having its own midlife crisis. Basketball, what's the astrological chart of a midlife crisis? It's the Uranus opposition. Here is Uranus in the chart of basketball. It's at 4 Scorpio. And then here I've got this chart for the start of the Olympics. And okay, Uranus is here at 9 Taurus. So you've got an opposition going on here. So usually when you have your Uranus oppositions, like your midlife crisis, it's this question of like, okay, what have I done with my life? I've got to take. Have I taken a stand for my principles? I mean, think of if the game is standing for humanitarian principles, that okay, we believe in the brotherhood, the sisterhood of humanity, that we can all get together and we should all treat each other as equals, and we should all be working together towards our common goal, betterment of humanity. These are the things that someone with Uranus conjunct Mars and in a strong 11th house would believe in. And thinking the game of basketball believes in all this. Okay, you suddenly got to show up at Berlin in the 1936 Olympics, under conditions that are totally opposite of that. And then so you're challenged. Okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to like boycott and not show up? Well, and then you're up against a pretty fierce opponent. You've also got the other difficult transit that the game of basketball had was Saturn conjunct its ascendant. Here's the ascendant. The rising sign of basketball, if I've got this right, is 20 degrees Pisces. Saturn during the 36 Olympics is here 21 Pisces, pretty much exactly conjunct the rising sign. So this is difficult. You're going to have some challenges when Saturn's on your ascendant. Suddenly you're struck with some hard reality. What are you going to deal with? And it's just like, okay, so I don't know. You kind of wonder, okay, did basketball win? Did it lose in this? It's maybe kind of a 50-50 draw. It's a reckoning with reality. They didn't necessarily win. They didn't necessarily lose. I think you have to look at the team. There weren't any African Americans on the basketball team. There was one Jew on the team that they allowed to play, and there was one Jew on the Canadian team. But unlike the the U.S. track and field team that had Jews on the team, that they didn't let them compete to not offend the host. I mean, the basketball team, at least they did allow the Jew to play, but um, so it's possibly a draw. How basketball did, up against the Nazis. But anyways, there's interesting things that happened during the game. This is the ball that they had. It's not a basketball. This is the ball that the Germans issued them. They didn't quite understand that you need a different kind of ball. So it was similar to soccer ball. It was slippery and it was really hard to dribble. Um, and so a lot of these games were actually, they didn't let them play indoors in a gym. They said, okay, so soccer's played outdoors. You should be able, tennis is played outdoors. You should be able to play this game outdoors. And it rained. It rained a lot during these games. And since these were all on clay courts, it was muddy. Some of these games were played in mud. And interestingly, the Spanish team was called home because the Spanish Civil War broke out during the Olympics. So they weren't allowed to compete. The Spanish team had to go home, I guess, fight the Civil War. 21 different nations competed, including conspicuously non-area nations of Brazil, Mexico, Philippines, Japan, and China. And the gold medal game was actually officiated by a Chinese person. I mean, he was allowed, he knew the rules really well. They let him officiate. So these are the triumphs. This is the Canadian basketball team. Um, this on the first row far left was the only Jewish member, Irving Toots Moretsky, and he was allowed to play. So this is an interesting film. I'm going to try to, let me find this on YouTube, of like some of the game. Let me advance this. There's some film
Okay.
of some of the basketball games that played. Here we go. This is some film of basketball at the Olympics. Well, shoot. Okay, that always messes up. Hold on. Here we go. Um, okay, well, kind of interesting clip. Let me see. So here's a picture of James Naismith. He's 74 years old, and he did not get invited by the U.S. Olympic Committee to come to be there with the team, but he was there. I think somebody else invited him, and he got to deliver the medal for the American team. Won the gold medal there. So he was there, and so that was basketball's dilemma at the 36th Olympic. It was very interesting, but the story goes on. Um, I'm going to talk now about basketball and African Americans. It's interesting. You ask yourself, well, what's the resonance? Why do basketball Americans have such resonance? I mean, why do African Americans have such a resonance with this game? And first of all, I want to acknowledge this person named Harry Bucky Lou. From what I've the research I've done, he was the first African American professional basketball player who was paid for his services, and he signed a contract in 1902. And I've noticed that I looked at his astrological chart. It's got the Sun in Capricorn, Venus and Mercury in Aquarius, and his Uranus is at 28 Virgo, exactly conjunct the Saturn in the chart of basketball. And also going to talk about this is interesting research that came across by Samuel Reynolds, that's in the Mountain Astrologer. And there's a recurring degree in the history of African Americans. If you look at the 9 degrees Scorpio and 9 degrees Taurus are often present in the history of African Americans. And Sam Reynolds talks about this opposition between Taurus and Scorpio. In one side, you've got the sign Taurus, and you've got greed, luxury, things that are just the good life. And then in the sign of Scorpio, you often have like a life and death struggle for survival. And this polarity, this back and forth, these two signs is what's a big part of the African American experience. And he points out that 8 and 9 degrees of of Taurus and Scorpio, or you often find them during events in the history of African Americans. Points out that, okay, first of all, let's look at the chart of basketball. The Mars is right here at 8 degrees Scorpio, 29 minutes. And okay, when the first person to die in the Revolutionary War for the United States was Crispus Attucks, who died in Boston March 3rd, 1770. He was African American, and Uranus at that point was at 8 degrees, 33 minutes Taurus. So in the same place. And then he also points out Martin Luther King, when he delivered his I Have a Dream speech, that happened with an ascendant of 9 degrees Scorpio. Same area. The Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863 with Pluto at 9 degrees Taurus, and then Malcolm X was born with Saturn at 9 degrees Scorpio. Barack Obama was born with Neptune at 8 degrees Scorpio. So this degree keeps reoccurring in history of African Americans. And next thing I want to talk about this, okay, what is the significance of this degree? So if you look at the Sabian symbols, that system of symbols where every degree the Scorpio has a symbol, has some meaning to has a symbolic meaning within that degree. If you look at 9 degrees Scorpio, the symbol for that is a dentist at work. And you figure, well, what is it about a dentist at work? What does that have to do with basketball? Well, the symbolism behind a dentist at work is it's is the symbolic. It's the curing the rot of society. Well, the rot of society of like racism, poverty, all the injustices. That there's something in this degree that keeps reoccurring. The quest for justice that's embodied in the struggles of African Americans. You get it here in this degree of Scorpio, and it's showing up there in the chart of basketball. And then you've got the opposite degree, 9 degrees Taurus, an opulent Christmas tree. This is the other side of it. And the symbolic meaning of 9 degrees Taurus is, or capacity for inner joy in dark times and confidence in a new dawn. It's ability to like hope in very bleak times, and that this is what is going on with those degrees. This is one of the reasons why I'm trying to explain the resonance of African Americans. This is half of what I got. Here's the other half of what I got. Um, there's a chart for the landing of the first slave chart in the United States for August 25th, 1619 in Virginia. And their African American astrologer consider that this moment of this landing in casting the chart for this. This is the chart of the African American experience. Um, this is what I found out listening to Vernon Robinson's lecture, which you can find here on the Norwalk website. Here is a chart. Um, Sun in Virgo. Interesting, Virgo is a sign of labor. And you've got um, so in this chart, let's look at the opposition of Mars Pluto. Mars is very similar degree to or basketball or to the Mars of basketball. It's off by 3 degrees, but it's close. Mars opposite Pluto. Um, let's think of this of like issues of slavery and the ownership of the self. You've got this intense struggle between these things. And so here you've got your body, Mars, and can you own it? It's just like in the sixth house. I think of the sixth house as the sixth house of servitude, enslavement. Somebody owns your services. Um, and then, okay, the 12th house is something that's yourself and your private. So, and you're hidden away. It's things you do just by yourself where nobody can see you. So here's where you could possibly have ownership of yourself and maybe liberation of yourself. But here, this is this is enslavement, is the way I'm seeing it. Um, I haven't thought about this chart a whole lot, but it's interesting. I'm hoping to speak to Vernon Robinson soon and find out more about what he's more research that he's done developing it. But this is the chart of the African American experience. Then let's look at the Emancipation Proclamation that happens June 1st, 1863, while the sun was conjunct um, its north node. Where is its north node? Um, right here, 11 Capricorn. So there are resonances that are happening. Martin Luther King is born January 15th, while the Neptune is conjunct the sun at 1 Virgo, and then Montgomery bus boycott begins December 5th, 1955, while Jupiter is conjunct the sun. So different things are going on here with this chart. But in terms of basketball, um, before we get to, I want to compare this with the chart of the National Basketball Association. The NBA, this is what happens after the Berlin Olympics. The next thing, basketball becomes professional. Before that, it's largely amateur. The attention is colleges and small gyms. Um, what's interesting here in the chart of the NBA, um, let's look at the South Node in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is like the fun sign, aspirational fun that we had before. Um, it's the amateurist, there's still the fun of the game, but yet we've moved away from that because the North Node is conjunct Mercury. Mercury is a sign associated with Virgo of like work and professionalism. So we've moved into a sort of a professionalization of what was once fun. Um, and people are making money off of this. But what's very interesting, it's like, let's compare the chart of the NBA with the chart of the first slave ship. So we've got Mars at 11 Scorpio, very close to Mars at where's well, okay, the Mars of basketball, that's a different chart. Mars 8 basketball. But let's look at Mercury. Mercury, the first slave ship. 15, 14 degrees, 15 minutes, Virgo. It's exactly conjunct the moon of the NBA chart. So there's something here. Virgo being the sign of labor, moon being the sign of the masses and of the tribe. There's some kind of a resonance here with like work and labor. Um, I don't quite have it figured out. I don't want to try to say I explain. I understand the symbolic meaning, but the fact that it's the same degree here, You've also got the Saturn of the NBA here. Um, so this, I'm sorry, Saturn of the first slave ship chart. Where is it? Um, okay, 21 um, Gemini. It's oddly conjunct the North Node and and Mercury in Gemini in the chart of the NBA. Um, so there's something going on here. There's some sort of resonance going on here. And I'm thinking, okay, sports has its parallels with slavery in an odd way because until recently, maybe until about 20, 30 years ago, a player would sign with a team and they were pretty much stuck playing with that team. And they could be bought. Their services would, they couldn't just quit and work with another team. No, they were in a sense sold. They were owned by that team. The next team would have to pay for their services. Now there's free agency, but for a long time there wasn't. So they're very strong parallels with with earlier in the 20th century sports and slavery that's going on here. So that's some of the resonance that's happening here. Um, Okay, so I'm done with the NBA. I want to talk about something I think that is cooler. This is wheelchair basketball. I was looking at these at last night on YouTube of games of like these women playing wheelchair basketball. There is a professional league in Britain now of they think they call it para sports. If you're a paraplegic, you can still do sports. People are paying to watch women in wheelchairs in Britain play sports. It's a professional league that's happening. And I found the chart. I got the chart for their team. Like their founding was April 20th, 2021. And here is their chart. Um, Interestingly, Venus is conjunct Uranus and Taurus. So here we have Uranus again. Wait, I'm sorry. Venus conjunct. Okay, hold on. Yeah, Venus is conjunct Uranus and Taurus. So Venus is women. Uranus is, it's basketball. It's also rebellion, doing something cutting edge going on. This is squared by Saturn. Saturn is disabilities and limitations, and okay, people with disabilities, but rubbing up against them and figuring out, okay, how far you can go even with your limits. And interestingly, Mars is 28 Gemini. This is exactly square to the Saturn of the basketball chart and opposite the sun of the chart for basketball. So this is interesting. I want to watch this league and find out just how they go with the future of basketball. So